on the meeting between Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa and President Donald Trump of the United States of America. And I'll start from my left with Mr. Solomon also. Good morning.
Good morning, Zena, and good morning to my co-panelists and your cherished viewers across the globe. It's always wonderful to be here on Saturdays. Kwame Nkrumah said something that I think is still relevant in our modern day politics, which was that the independence of Ghana was meaningless unless until it was linked to the total liberation of Africa. If you look at it on the surface, you would think that you were just making a statement, but that was a prophetic statement. That is a statement that is still relevant today, that Africa can only be taken serious when we are united. The unity of Africa is so paramount that if we are to go as individual countries, we would never make any headway. America, Donald Trump invited Cyril Ramaphosa. Donald Trump is the president of the United States of America. Let's get it straight. It's the coming together of countries like what we have that makes America the United States of America. So can you imagine Ramaphosa going to America as the president of the United States of Africa? Are you sure Donald Trump would have been able to do what he did to him? But here I am not interested in going after Donald Trump. I am interested in, as it were, dealing with Ramaphosa. Because in diplomatic circles, Ramaphosa cannot convince me sitting here that he was never in the know that that video will be shown to him. It could never have been a surprise. You take it as a surprise at your own peril. It would have been discussed, but mind you, it fits into the local politics of South Africa. That is what is happening. What is the position of the EFF led by Julius Malema in terms of land expropriation? That is what we are discussing. And I believe that if there is anybody who was a sellout on that occasion, it is rather Ramaphosa and nobody. Here is the EFF preaching that the land redistribution in South Africa is a must, and that they can never be strangers on their own land. The whites have gotten enough, they are not sacking them. That's how you have taken it now, give us some to also feed. And this has been the central theme of that political party, which they have a sizable number of South African populace supporting that idea. So if you cannot deal with the issues of land expropriation in South Africa as Ramaphosa, together with your ANC, mind you, the ANC is ANC because of this same issue. That they had always told South Africans that they were in to protect their interests. And here, when I say South Africans, I'm talking about black South Africans, because the Afrikaners are also South Africans. And those, the colors doesn't change anything. Knowing very well that he couldn't deal effectively with Malema back home, he had to go and hide behind Donald Trump. Well, whose video was shown? Was it not Malema? Kill the boys, kill the boys. This video has been there since. He did it somewhere 23 or so. Did you ever hear anybody speak to that matter? And as a president, you go into a meeting with a colleague president, and one of your citizens is being lambasted, a video is being shown to you, you are unable to question the integrity of the person doing that, then you want me to take you serious? No, if anybody was a sellout on that occasion, it's Ramaphosa. And any day, I would never, because you see, it is not just right that, I don't know whether those that are thinking that what is happening in South Africa is right, they have actually been to South Africa. The whites are having a field day. All the juicy lands. You go to South Africa, you go to Zimbabwe, you go to Mozambique. It is for them. Recently, when Donald Trump invited the Afrikaners, the whites, that they can come, you grant them, amnesty, and so on and so forth in the United States. How many of them answered the call? Because they are living large in South Africa. They are treated as kids. Anytime there are xenophobic attacks, these are brothers who have been conscientized to see fellow Africans as enemies. They rather prefer to attack black Africans rather than the whites. They worship them. Go to the city of something. Go to Cape Town. I have told you here before, I was robbed in South Africa. Look, this mark I got in South Africa. They stabbed me. There was a white guy there. They didn't attack the white guy. They came to me. They took my money. They took my phones. And they were laughing. Because of the kind of orientation that we have been given by these whites. And to further add insult to injury, you go there and you give one of your own out. So I will never blame Donald Trump. He is trying to protect his American interest. And what's the American interest? The American interest is to make sure that South Africa, that is in terms of economy very strong, is weakened. America can only be classified as a rich country when there are poor countries. There can never be any rich man without a poor person. The reason for someone being rich is for someone to be poor. So the continuous poverty levels of Africa is what is making other countries rich. And if we are not going to be mindful about these facts and revert back to the core values of the founding fathers of the African Union, and to be united, go on the tangent of removing all bottlenecks, barriers. Until recently, you needed a visa to even go to South Africa. As an African. So now you make the mistake and say that you want to go to Congo tomorrow. You will spend more days than moving from Ghana to China. We have established the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Go and see how they are unable to trade, because the issue of transportation is even so key. We are not able to move freely across countries. Yet every 25th of May we celebrate what? Africa Union Day. What is so how are we united? Is it on paper? Is it by this or what? So yes, Donald Trump would have insulted all of us, or he would have insulted Africa, but we have allowed ourselves to be insulted. Presidents in Africa must begin the process of actualizing real unity. It's a must. We live in Africa, and all of us, the common lingua franca, whatever, or language is either English or French. Kiswahili could have been popularized. We have a key language here, it could have been popularized. Our local languages, how many of us even want to be associated with it? We don't do it. We have adopted them. The least opportunity. Africa wants to hold a summit, African summit. All the heads of states are invited by Macron. That young man invites 80-year-old president, 70-year-old president, and they all move to Paris and go and salute you. Who will take you serious? Who will take Africa serious when every day Lampedusa, our men and women are dying on the ocean? When we have enough resources here to be able to develop our continent so that our people get jobs to do. So we are allowing ourselves, when we have every opportunity, politicians are given resources to manage and manage it well, to safeguard the interest of the unborn generation, the younger generation, and even the elderly. What do? They dissipate it anyhow. And so for me, it is an eye-opener. It calls for us as a country, or as a continent, to go back, revisit the core issues of unity. Because united we stand, divided we fall. Our brother in Traore, in Burkina, what is happening? Are there no machinations to even get him out? And are you sure that the people will just plan with those in Europe and America? They will use one of our own. The last time, if you have not spoken inside, as the common people will say, if you have not screamed, the ECOWAS president led by Tinubu, that old man together with the Kufuor, they were going to remove forcibly Traore, Abdurrahman, and then the Malian president. ECOWAS was going to fight ECOWAS. You remember that issue? So it's all about unity. When we unite, we can develop. And when we develop, we will be talking and playing the ball as rich men. Rich continent against rich continent. Donald Trump goes to Saudi Arabia. When he's speaking to what? The king of Saudi Arabia, he gives him all the respect. Is that not the case? Because he's talking to a rich man. He meets the sheikhs in UAE. It's co-equals. Goes to Qatar, he even takes a gift. Qatar gives them Boeing. Gives the American, Boeing is made in America, yet he took a gift from Qatar to the military. That is rich men talking. But poor men have no place when it comes to discussing matters with the rich man. That is why you must, by all means, hook or crook, make sure that your continent is developed. Else we will never be respected among the Committee of Nations. And that is how I see what has happened with these whole things.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, if you just join us, we're discussing that article written by President Mahama. Having watched the scene, what happened during that meeting between Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa and Donald Trump. Let me go to Doc. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. In fact, let me first of all say that Donald Trump is a different animal. He's not your typical American president. We can look at how he managed the Ukrainian president. We can look at even his relationship with the King of England, which, if you're a diplomat, you can certainly say that there's a small rift between King of England and Donald Trump. Never before has that happened. And in fact, I was not happy for Ramaphosa to even consider going to America under the circumstances, in the sense that the president should have known, based on Elon Musk's relationship with Donald Trump, and some of the things they had, the picture they had painted South Africa in relation to how they were managing the whites. Though not true, but those are signals that he should have picked and maybe delayed or forestalled having to have an engagement with Donald Trump. At any rate, we must be very careful. I personally had a certain perception about African Americans, okay? There's a huge gap between we Africans and the African Americans in terms of our perception about life. And until you live with them and appreciate their history, okay, though they're Africans, their history is not the same as ours, based on their great-great-great-grandfather's slave experience. And you know, life has a way of changing you when you go through certain things. And I think that when you're in the Californias and other states where for no reason, except for the fact that you are black and driving a Porsche car, they can stop you and ask for your license and all these kinds of things, which they wouldn't do to a typical white man. When you experience these things, you can then come to appreciate sometimes how the black Americans react to the white, you know, either police or not. Now, I'm saying all of this as a background and saying that I think South Africa's president, either his diplomats in America failed to, you know, check the waters and advise him on how to prepare to meet Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump would embarrass you when he gets a chance. And for that matter, Ramaphosa should have been well equipped and aware of the many things that, because I remember that Donald Trump in some interviews was showing pictures, of atrocities, and was trying to, as it is, make people aware that Ukraine was doing the wrong things. Okay, and I, for one, I must say that Ramaphosa should have been much more prepared if he agreed to have a meeting with Donald Trump, in terms of also photos, also videos, which then he could have, as it is, maybe respectfully, even after he left the White House, granted a major interview with CNN, and all of these things can be arranged. Or Fox News, you understand? You pay for it and clear yourself and your country's image. I, for one, have not been very happy to hear that white South Africans have been given refugee status in America. It's a damning, sort of a report on your country. Though it's bogus, it is damning. And I think that more work now has to be done really by South Africa, let me say, to correct the wrongful image painted on South Africa, and to help people appreciate that, listen, the things in South Africa are crazy. Look at what Solomon is saying. Listen, for crying out loud, they killed this music artist, Lucky Dube. I mean, come on, who does that? Who does that? So there are many underground stories of brutalities being meted out by blacks on blacks, or shall I say, South Africans on South Africans. And sometimes, too, unfortunately, the stories are misrepresented. With regards to being xenophobic and all of these things. When you go into the nitty-gritty, you realize that within themselves, they are doing it. But when it happens to be a Nigerian, then, hey, we blow the story up wrongly. So we, even in Africa, also have to be mindful of the fact that we do not understand South Africa. I'm Ghanaian. and I must admit on national TV that a visit to South Africa a day or 2 or 3 days or whatever does not make me an authority on the nuances in South Africa. I was privileged to watch them when they had to share power just recently, and in the interviews with their legislative arm, I realized that wow, the dynamics in that country is totally different from Nigeria, totally different from Kenya, and these are some of the key countries in Africa. So we need to learn to be a bit hesitant in our discussion of some of our neighboring and distant countries, and rightly so. South Africa, in as much as it is African, their economy, we are nowhere near South Africa's economy. Let's admit the fact. But I must also say that in terms of the trickling of the economic gains, I think we're better off. The distinction between those who have and don't have in South Africa is so grave. We don't have shanty towns here, and we don't have very, let me say, hardened criminals like South Africa. Some of the criminals we have here are brutal, but actually the South African criminals, my goodness, some of the things I've seen and heard, the way they don't respect life, and some of the atrocities they commit on their own people. I mean, I had a friend, thank to God he's alive. He was just to transfer an envelope of cash from one location to the other. They slit his throat until they managed to get him. They slit his throat. I mean, to get the money, And they, when they are taking yours, there is not the arm robberies we see here, heavy ones. So I just want to say that South Africa certainly has a lot of work to do with regards to their international image, and they shouldn't take it for granted. They need to work on it, and then they also need to work on their people. And those who have seen Joburg, and been to some of the townships, clear day and night. It's like I don't know how to say, you know, even the likes of Trasako versus Choco is small. I mean, I'm just, the contrast that we will see, or East Legon, or where you live in a beautiful neighborhood, compared to some of the places at Jamestown. I mean, that is a contrast you have. But the South African one, Masa, when you see it, you wonder, how? Beautiful buildings in Botswana, then you come to the Sowetos and things, and like, hey, what is this? Pretoria, nice. Then you go here, like, hey, this same country, just between Amasaman and, let me say, Pokwase, the contrast is unimaginable. So I think that Ghana has it better. Our GDP does not compare to South Africa, but I think per opportunities in Ghana to go to school and, you know, all of this, Ghana is far better on a whole. And I think that South Africa certainly needs a lot of work. And it's unfortunate that Donald Trump, as we always know, his crazy behavior, or shall I say, very uncultured behavior, is unacceptable. And I also would use this opportunity to say that, listen, we need to sit up and sell our story to America. We need to sell our own story to the West. The West tell their people what they want to tell them about us. We also need to be now prideful and sell our story. I mean, I think their immigration officers, when they now know that, hey, Africa, this is also in Africa, and there are things happening. Africans are not monkeys. I think that when we get into America and we're crossing the immigration, they will see us in a different light. So I think it's rather an opportunity, certainly, for all of us to wake up and sell Africa and sell it well, not through just our food and clothing, but our intellectual capacity and our ability to do things and to change the narrative. Professors were saying that some of the beautiful architecture in Africa are not done by Africans. I mean, these are the kinds of stories they say. And I think the narrative is on us to change the narrative. We have to change the narrative. And this gives us an opportunity to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, having said that, let's go to Mr. Pratt whilst we await the entry of Kojo Chumbafo. Mr. Pratt?
Well, first of all, I must say that when I read the piece by His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, I felt very, very proud. I felt so very proud, partly because I contrasted his stance on what Donald Trump had done with the stance of the just ended regime of His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. I recall seeing the Ghanaian president sitting in front of Anthony Blinken and reporting on another head of state, indeed, in this case, the head of state of Burkina Faso, and asking for U.S. assistance in order to subvert the interest of another African country. The contrast is so huge, so very huge. And when I read President John Dramani Mahama's article, I said, perhaps we are redeeming ourselves. We are beginning to show to the world that we will stand up for what we believe in and that we would not be kicked around anymore. Now, having said that, I think I must agree with Solomon Owusu, the other panelist, for his remarks about Cyril Ramaphosa. I was deeply embarrassed by Cyril Ramaphosa. And I was more worried when I heard some African commentators saying that, oh, he comported himself well, that in the face of the insults and the attack, he remained cool and so on. And I was wondering, and when we're being humiliated, when we're being pummeled when you're being attacked, if you remain cool and composed, is that a credit? Is that really a credit? You know, one of the questions that I've asked is that what was Cyril Ramaphosa doing in the Oval Office? Who sent him there? Who asked him to go there? What was his problem? You see, again, I have to agree with Solomon that he knew that he was going to be humiliated. He knew that the stage had been set to embarrass Africa, to embarrass South Africa. And you can tell that from the composition of his delegation. He actually took time to select white golfers to be part of his delegation. And his administration explained that Donald Trump is in love with golf, and that the selection of white golfers was to serve as an appeasement to Donald Trump. Cyril Ramaphosa, why this behavior? Why this embarrassment? I mean, unbelievable. He knew it was going to happen. It had happened to many others before him, you understand? And yet, he deliberately walked into a trap to be humiliated. I find nothing graceful about how Cyril Ramaphosa behaved in South Africa. Cyril Ramaphosa was an embarrassment to the African people, and he must be told in the face. African leaders have a duty to solidarize with themselves and with their people in their struggles against decadence, in their struggle against poverty, in their struggles against underdevelopment, and so on. The leaders of Africa must understand that it is not their duty to appease those who lead the countries which have led us to our current state of underdevelopment and poverty. And Cyril Ramaphosa is one of those leaders who has not been able to find his bearing. Now, I was struck by the fact that the leader of the country, which most supported apartheid in South Africa, is the one who has the effrontery today to look South Africa in the face and accuse South Africa of racism. You see, sometimes we forget. Nelson Mandela, after 27 years in prison, when he was released, when he contested elections and won, and became president of South Africa, he was still on the terrorist list of the United States of America. Now, it is the United States of America, its president, which is turning around to accuse South Africa of racism. Unbelievable. I was looking for some description. I'm still struggling to find some description. And I know that the description I have now, which I'm going to use, may be inappropriate, but it still tells the story. And it is this case of the pot calling the kettle black. I mean, the racism in this statement itself is huge. Pot and kettle, the symbolism is huge. But let me use it for now. You understand? Unbelievable. Unbelievable. That President of the United States of America is talking about racist attacks. And in some of his speeches, he actually refers to what is happening in South Africa as genocide against whites.
White genocide.
Now, this is the country which is supplying the bombs which are being dropped on Gaza. 70,000 people have been killed in Gaza. 2/3 of them are women and children. This is the country which is providing intelligence to the Israeli army to bomb Gaza. They are showing the Israelis where to bomb. This is that country, Donald Trump. In the last 11 weeks, Israel has blocked food, water, medical supplies to Gaza with the approval of Donald Trump. And Donald Trump has the effrontery to accuse South Africa of racism. Unbelievable. But that is what has happened. It has happened because some of our African leaders really qualify to be described as house niggers. And they truly are house niggers. You see, the African story has not been told. The true African story has not been told yet.
By ourselves.
Yes. And indeed, Sana, please allow me to say this. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been pondering. And as a result, I decided to write a book, which is finished now.
Oh,
you know.
Great.
You wrote a book in weeks.
The wallow is there. So at any time, when he pours it, it's there.
So I've actually written a book on reparation. Its history, the politics, the struggles, and the law. I mean, international law. I submitted it to the publishers last week. And hopefully it should come out immediately. And I do this because it is important to tell that African story. You understand? Because if you don't tell that African story, if you don't know that history, we would always be bullied. Look, we suffered centuries of slavery. The transatlantic slave trade. What was it about? Our forebears, the strongest, because the slavers were not interested in weak people, they needed strong people. So the strongest of our population were captured and sent out to work for the United States of America, some of these Western countries and so on, without pay for hundreds of years. And so, they captured our best architects, our best medicine men or doctors, our engineers and so on, were captured. 12.6 million Africans were removed from here and sent abroad to serve as beasts of burden. The African underdevelopment is partly accounted for by this. You understand? Now, only recently, when COVID-19 broke out, it was during that period that I learned that the art of vaccination came from West Africa. The art of vaccination is African. It came from West Africa. Today, we are looking for AstraZeneca vaccines and so on. We started it. It was stolen from us. You understand? So the harm that the transatlantic slave trade did to us is huge. But you see, we even have to go back to the origin. And if you go back to the origin, it's even more shocking. What Western religion has done to us, Western religion, the Catholic Church, what it did to us is huge. Look, it was in 1452, that the Pope signed the papal bull, authorizing King Alfonso of Portugal to go and civilize the rest of the world. And by civilization meant converting the world to Christianity. And in the papal bull, please, if you have Google it, it's there. The Pope said that those who refuse to be converted to Christianity should be killed. The Pope. That those who refuse to convert to Christianity should be killed. Their wives should be seized from them, and so on. This is 1452. It is the papal bull who described African lands as vacant, lands without owners, and so on, and created the conditions for what became classical colonialism. And under classical colonialism, we had no rights as African people at all. No rights. You see, first of all, we couldn't choose our leaders. In the Gold Coast, at some point, district chief executives were appointed by the Queen of England. We are not talking about the president, too. District chief executives were appointed by the Queen of England. The head of state who was the governor who sacked the Christian Borg Castle, was a representative of the Queen of England. We had no rights at all. When I was growing up, and I'm still alive, I'm sitting here, so you can imagine what my grandfather saw. When I was growing up, you go to school, your science teacher is white. Your science teacher is white. In some schools, the headmasters were white. You go to church, the priest is white. You go to hospital, the doctor is white. So everybody who mattered in a society was white. I mean, invariably, inferiority complex begins to creep in as a result of the setting. In Accra, the Rich Hospital, which is today the Greater Accra Regional Hospital, was a whites-only hospital. Black people who were there were sweepers, were servants. It was a whites-only hospital. What has today become the Accra Club was a whites-only club. You understand? This is what we have been through. Now, if you go to the United States of America, the situation is even worse. When these white vagabonds, in fact, as prisoners, buccaneers and crooks and so on, were sent to the United States of America, what did they do? They killed the Chicanos. They killed the Red Indians in order to possess their lands, to take their lands from them. They killed them. They massacred them. In fact, the United States of America today is built on the blood of Indians and the brawn power of blacks. That is why today in the United States of America, and the United States of America up to today has not overcome this racism and so on. So the Chicanos, the Latinos, the African Americans and so on are still subjected to extreme racism. Extreme racism. So if you live in a country like that, if you're president of a country like that, and you can turn around and call South Africa a racist society, something must be wrong. Something is not adding up. You understand? I mean, in 1976, I visited the United States. You know, I toured about 8 of the states in the United States. And to my shock and horror, I was taken to a place called Mikusuki in the south, near Miami and so on. And I was told I was being taken to an Indian reservation. I didn't know what it meant until I got there. It's a zoo for human beings. Indians are kept there in their so-called natural habitats. And before you say, and it's happening up to today, you pay gate fee to go and see Indians in their so-called natural habitat. This is a country which is talking about human rights. This is a country which is preaching to us. In any case, look, after apartheid, and I visit South Africa quite a lot, you understand, the blacks are still completely dispossessed of their lands. And Dr. Admako Kisi spoke earlier and described the scene. I mean, you go to Joburg. Where are the blacks in Joburg? Apart from a few like Ramaphosa who have escaped the poverty net and are hobnobbing with the whites and so on, the blacks are still living in the apartheid era. Master, they live in shacks, and you know what a shack is? Homes built of curtains, or at best, discarded corrugated iron sheets. And they burn all the time, and they're harassed by the police all the time. You move from South Africa, from Joburg, and you drive 2 hours to Bella Bella, and see the tracts of land owned by white people. Indeed, until recently, any black you found in Bella Bella is a driver, a domestic servant, or farm laborer. And Donald Trump doesn't see this. He doesn't know about this. You know, and he's talking about this war song, you know, Kill the Boers. That's not a song which was composed today. Indeed, it was a war song of resistance. It was a war song of resistance, which Malema continues to sing. You understand? It's a symbol of the resistance of black people to years of torture, to years of dehumanizing existence, and so on. And then he raises this issue, and so Ramaphosa's answer is that, oh, Malema belongs to a small party. He's not mainstream. Is that the answer? Cyril Ramaphosa, is that all you could say? And then he says that in South Africa there are laws which allows everybody to express himself. That's Ramaphosa's answer to Donald Trump. Incredible, unbelievable. I cannot believe it. But you see, with leaders like Cyril Ramaphosa, how are we ever going to make progress on this continent? Today, it is hard to find an Nkrumah in the leadership of Africa. Today, it's extremely difficult to find a Modibo Keita or a Sekou Touré or an America Cabral and so on. They are all looking like Cyril Ramaphosa. And that is why I'm so very happy that His Excellency President John Dramani Mahama said something which is edifying, said something which clearly shows that among this rabble of neo-colonial leaders and so on, it is still possible to find one or two, maybe three or four, who will stand up to defend the dignity of the African people, and who would insist that African people should solidarize with themselves in the face of this aggression. And Master, a lot of people don't understand why the West is supporting the Zionists in Israel against Palestine. They don't understand. I mean, only yesterday I was talking to some friends and I said, what is happening in the world? So, you mean the Western countries can't see what is happening in Gaza and so on? I said, look, they cannot condemn what is happening in Gaza because a condemnation of what is happening in Gaza will be a condemnation of themselves. This is how capitalism was built. Capitalism was built on slave labor. The accumulation which led to capitalism is built on slave labor. You understand? And we have been so brainwashed that now we actually act against ourselves. And one of the most popular Christian songs is Amazing Grace. Those of you who go to church. When they start singing it in church, they sing it with passion, Amazing Grace. And so
How sweet.
do you know the history of that song? That song was written by an accomplice in slave raiding. Slave trader wrote Amazing Grace. So you black man, when you go to church and you are singing Amazing Grace with passion, you are a fool. No, it is true. Master, what is wrong with what I just said?
Out of ignorance.
But if you are ignorant, what are you?
So we are pleading. So we're pleading.
So they sing Amazing Grace with passion. A song written by a slave trader. Understand? But we have been so brainwashed. And look,
even the Achimota issue, that's why I was not happy. We used to have our hair is literally nappy. And for that matter, nappy hair was rather an issue for whites. And should somebody go to Achimota with hair that is nappy, who are we to be? That was our natural, type of hair.
Okay. You see, of course, everybody knows that I still hold President Mills in high esteem. I think he was a decent man. He was an honest man. He loved his country and so on. But there are some aspects of President Mills's life, which tells me that he himself had become a victim a victim of the colonial narrative when he decided that libation pouring should be ended because he was a Christian. I was wondering, how can such a fine man, a man dedicated to his country, a man who in his heart of hearts felt that he stood for African liberation and so on, come up with such an edict?
He wasn't a traditionalist.
It was because he, like many others, have been brainwashed, completely brainwashed. Look, it was Bishop Akwesi Sapong of Kumasi, Catholic bishop, and I want to salute Bishop Akwesi Sapong wherever he is, who came out and said, look, there's no difference between libation pouring and the Holy Sacrament. Catholic bishop, he said it, not me. I'm sure you've all heard it, that there's no substantial difference between libation pouring and the Holy Sacrament. Look, it was only recently that Africans, Ghanaians, could go to church in African robes. It was considered hidden. It is only recently that when the priests wear their cassock and so on, sometimes you see stripes of kente and so on in it. It was not allowed. African drums were banned from the churches. African drums. And compare African drums to European drums and see which produces the best rhythm and so on. But ours was banned. Ours was banned so that we become dependent even on the West for our music, for our culture and so on. The time has come to change this. The time has come to build that new Africa, whose people are proud of who they are. You see, we live in the tropics. We live in the tropics. And the tropical condition, in fact, demands that we eat some foods. Those who live in the temperate region, because of their geography, their weather and so on, have to eat some things which makes them warm. Okay? And so on. But we have been so brainwashed that today we are even refusing to eat tropical food and are eating food from the temperate zone. It is not even good for our health. Look, up to today, our legal profession believes that you need to wear a black suit, put a bib around your neck,
That's a British legal system.
wear a gown, and on top of that, wear a wig in order to look decent. Unbelievable. And we uphold that as some tradition. Imagine the kind of heat that we went through yesterday. And imagine judges going to work in that apparel. And if, God forbid, your air condition fails, by the time you get to the court building, I don't want to smell your armpit. I mean, they subject themselves to this indignity.
So you recommend that they change their outfit, like the speaker has?
It is changing in some countries.
So maybe
I understand that in Burkina Faso, it is changing, and so on. For their own comfort, don't change because of me or what I say. For your own comfort, do you feel comfortable in that clownish outfit? Do you feel comfortable in that clownish outfit? So all of these have to change. And they can only change if the true African story is told. If the achievements of the African people are highlighted. And if we begin to fight to build that new Africa, proud Africa of proud Africans, owning their own resources and exploiting these resources for the benefit of our people. It will only change if we as Africans begin to tear down these colonial boundaries. And you see, again in 1884, Otto von Bismarck, then Chancellor of Berlin, or of Germany, invited other colonial leaders, European leaders, to come and have a discussion. And the purpose of the discussion was that they should divide Africa among themselves without war. They didn't want any bloody conflict and so on. They should be able to divide Africa among themselves without war. This is 1884, the Berlin Conference. Now, what did they do? They put a map of Africa on the table. They drew pencils and used those pencils to draw lines demarcating their areas of influence. The boundaries we have today were drawn in Berlin in 1884 without the presence of any African. There was no African at the table. And we fight over these borders. Amazing, we fight over these borders. I've traveled through Africa a bit. Kodo, I've traveled through Africa a bit.
You're announcing Kodo's presence.
Yes, and when you travel across our borders, it is shocking. You see, one of the most typical boundaries is the Ghana-Togo border. Now, if you go on the Ghana-Togo border, Senna, you find one house, not two houses, one house. The kitchen is in Togo and the bedroom is in Ghana. How did that happen? It happened because those who drew that line of demarcation did not care who your uncle was, who your brother was, who spoke what language, and so on. They were just demarcating their areas of influence. They didn't care about we the Africans. So it is that today, if you cross the Ghana-Ivory Coast border, you have Nzemas in Ghana and you have Nzemas in La Côte d'Ivoire. They've been divided. That division was not their choice. You understand? And there's a very funny case of one of these African countries where two brothers, I think they were twin brothers, I'm not so sure. One was prime minister of another country and the other one was president of another country and so on. These boundaries mean nothing. They're useless boundaries that we should pull down and build the United States of Africa and integrate our economy, integrate our armed forces. And you see, up to today, any African leader who works for this aspiration is killed. Last week or 2 weeks ago, I was so sad. The intelligence officer who led the coup against Patrice Lumumba, Belgium intelligence officer who led the coup against Patrice Lumumba in the Congo, actually told the press 2 weeks ago that he was responsible for killing Patrice Lumumba and that he cut Patrice Lumumba's body into 34 pieces. He's saying it. He's not being accused. He's saying it. That he cut Patrice Lumumba's body into 34 pieces and dissolved these pieces in acid and kept his front teeth as souvenir. Now, the shock of it is that this intelligence officer is still walking the streets of Belgium. Nobody has arrested him. He's not being prosecuted. Is that not shocking? Belgian society today accepts this guy. He's not being prosecuted. Nothing has happened to him. He cut an African hero, an African leader, popularly elected leader, into 34 pieces and kept his front teeth as souvenir. And he's still walking about free man. I mean, is that not shocking? Is that not shocking? Look at what they did to Chris Hani. When Mandela assumed power, they didn't want radicals around him. They didn't want people who think like me around him and so on. So they decided to eliminate them. Chris Hani was shot, point blank shot. They killed him. When Gaddafi started talking about the emancipation of Africa and its unity and so on, look at how they killed him and put him in a deep freezer. Put his body in a deep freezer in a supermarket for people to go and see. Can you imagine? They killed one of the greatest African leaders and put his body in an ordinary deep freezer, put it in a supermarket for people to go and see. And this is not in the 1960s, this is not in the 1970s, this is now. So look, Africans, let's wake up. Let's wake up. Senna, I may not live long enough. I may not live for a very long time. Anything can happen. I may die through natural consequences and so on. Because of the way I'm speaking today, I can become a target of attack of anything. They've killed people who didn't say half of what I'm saying today. So I would not be surprised if one day I'm killed as well. But you see, we must make these people realize that the more they kill, the more we will open up our minds and fight for what is ours and build that new Africa. That they cannot stop us by killing our leaders. They can kill Bob Marley, they can kill Patrice Lumumba, they can kill Chris Hani, they can kill whoever they want to kill. But more and more progressive leaders, more and more leaders who want a paradigm change in Africa, more and more leaders who will begin to speak like John Mahama has spoken will emerge. I'm happy with what Mr. John Mahama has said, but I need to remind him, and I think that this is my duty as an African, to remind him that there's a lot of work to be done. Yes, we are happy with what he has said, but what he has said will pale into insignificance and will have no meaning for as long as we continue to harbor a U.S. military base on Ghanaian soil. For as long as we continue to harbor a U.S. military base on Ghanaian soil, his defense of Cyril Ramaphosa would not mean much.
Thank you very much. There is this Adam who is watching us via Facebook, who says, in 2006, when I served on UN peacekeeping duty, I found to my surprise that the mayor of Bondoko in northern Cote d'Ivoire, Kofi Dapa, was a first cousin to then Minister for National Security of Ghana, Kan Dapa. Very interesting. There's also Kamal Dokorogo Ibrahim, who is also joining us. The struggle against racism remains the bread and butter for some of us in our professional lives. Ignorance is no longer an acceptable excuse on our part as Africans to allow this to continue. Can't wait to read Anga Kwesi Pratt's book. Engineer, good morning, and nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Senna. Good morning to all of you. Good morning to all listeners. Good morning to my favorite MPP doctor, to my big brother, Uncle Kwesi, a man that I admire a lot for his foresight. Some of the things he was saying in the 80s and the 90s for which he got into trouble, was arrested. We'll talk about arrests later, I'm sure. Some of them have become what we are doing today. One of the things he said then was, why the hell are you people allowing these people to come and take our gold and take it away? Why aren't we selling it ourselves or letting it stay in the ground? What are we doing today? What has it done to the stability of our city? In just 4 months. In just 4 months. What has it done to the stability of our city? Kwesi Pratt said then, why are you people still selling our state institutions? Not one of them in private hands will survive. What happened? Today, people are dismantling the Bonsa tire factory and using it to make saucepans. Abosu Gold glass factory. The implements that was brought there by no less a government than the Buzi administration, because my father was the first general manager. So I spent part of my formative years in Abosu. And they had a phenomenal, and the idea, give them credit where it is due. Of course, that's Dr. Kwame Nkrumah's idea. Like, let's decentralize industrialization to stop urban drift. Those policies were not policies that we are always standing up. We the politicians, they give us a speech, we go and stand somewhere and we say what has been said 50 years ago. But actually 50 years ago, people actually actualized it. But before I go to Cyril Ramaphosa's disgraceful encounter with Donald Trump, I'm sure most of you, the listeners and the watchers and those of us sitting here, we know something called the subwoofer, right? Some of you have subwoofers, you like subwoofers, you like the sound that comes out of subwoofers, especially for people like Uncle Kwesi who love reggae music, and I love reggae music. Reggae music on a subwoofer is unbelievable, right? Okay. The development of subwoofers started in 1970s, the 1970s. There are two physicists called Thiel and Benson. They experimented with the idea of bass extension with small enclosures, okay? But they were limited by something called the Hoffman iron law. That iron law posited that it was impossible to extend the sound of bass through small enclosures because of the natural frequency of bass. So there was a gentleman called Mr. Bose, an Indian professor in MIT, who came to Ghana for whatever he came for. And his host took him to a Wulome concert. And at that Wulome concert, with Nite Ashite and Manua of blessed memory, there was a gentleman sitting on a box. For those of you who like Wulome music, go back and watch them on YouTube. There's a gentleman sitting on a box. And there was incredible bass sound coming out of the box that he was using, to the extent that Nite Ashite and his group played Ghana traditional music without a bass guitar, because the percussion that comes from a bass guitar wasn't needed because of that box that that gentleman was, you know. For those of you who listen to that music, Mr. Bose bought one of those boxes, Professor Bose bought one of those boxes, took it to MIT, and then he figured out you actually didn't need to create the bass sound through any extension. What you needed to do was to separate the sound. And when it all comes together, you will hear the same thing. So for those of you who don't know, the origins of your subwoofer came from the Gans, Nite Ashite, Mahama'S, and Wulome. And you know what happened next? Mr. Bose left MIT quickly, created his Bose industry, and today that Bose franchise or that Bose corporation is the most valuable sound asset in the world. They are worth billions. So it highlights what Kwesi Pratt has been saying, how we limit ourselves. So Ramaphosa lost a very important opportunity to tell our story, and I'm completely disgusted. He is one of the richest black people in the world. For those of you who don't know, Cyril Ramaphosa owns MTN. So he had absolutely nothing to lose telling the American president his peace of mind about what he has been to, because he himself has been to prison. Cyril Ramaphosa grew up in Ghana. At airport, student hostel. That is where he went to school. So, what was it about that story that he couldn't tell? What was it about the exploitation of South Africa that he couldn't tell? For those of you who watched the coronation of King Charles, where do you think all the diamonds on the crown that he was wearing came from? They are called the Cullinan diamonds. Go and Google it. A South African, a Boer, stole those diamonds, took it to the United Kingdom, they cut it, placed it on their crown, end of story. Nobody's asking them any questions. The other colored ones that you saw, called the Kohinoor collection, came from India. Same story. So our leaders should learn to tell a story.
In fact, the gold cards.
I don't want to go there.
It's from Ghana.
It's embarrassing.
The gold is from Ghana.
I didn't want to go there since you said it. When you go to Amsterdam, when you go to Holland, the gold carriage that the king sits in has a mosaic depicting slavery. And it has been there. Google it. Just Google the gold carriage of the king of Holland. Depicting white men defiling African women. It is on the cart, or it is on the carriage. In fact, in Holland, there is a festival on days when white people paint their faces black to mock black people. It's today. Blackface is there today. They do it. So, Cyril Ramaphosa, you lost an opportunity. And if you didn't lose an opportunity, then you should fire every single person who works with you, because they should have told you this was coming. You saw how the president of Ukraine was forced to defend himself, and I'm proud of that man. You can call him whatever you want. He defended himself against an onslaught that came against his people. When you go to those places, you represent our people. You don't have to be rude, but when you are confronted with statements that are not true, you should defend our position. Because the story of the African is a sad story. A continent that has so much, and yet we have been given so little. Of course, part of it is our own doing. I mean, the story is told of Nana Kwame Nansa, who was unsure whether he should allow the Portuguese or is it the Danish to come to our shores, because he had figured out that when the water comes to the shore, it leaves because of gravity for a good reason. For those of you who have been to Cape Town, if you've ever been to Cape Town, the story of the exploitation of South African blacks is told immediately you step out of the airport. In your car going to your hotel, on the left side, you will see the shanty towns. And Uncle Kwesi and Doc were actually not graphic enough. In fact, the cardboard is not part of the retinue. It is plastic waste. When you go to Cape Town, as soon as you exit the airport, on the left side, just look on your left, you will see the shanty towns there. In those shanty towns, nobody has teeth in that place. Because you know what? They are actually allowed, they are actually given access to all kinds of moonshine to drink. Nobody has, there isn't one tooth in any of those shanty towns. Everybody operates on gums. And then you step onto the outskirts, the suburbs, go to Stellenbosch, go to Kirstenbosch, and you see one white person who owns a vineyard which is bigger than the whole of Accra. And I'll tell you no lie, those who have gone there know what I'm saying. And guess what? That is where all the black people work. So all these South African wines that we love to drink, and I'm not taking myself out of it. I like my glass of jamja, relaxes me after a hard day's work. Puts me to Marula. Yes, puts me to sleep. Tell no lie. Okay? You can walk through the vineyards in Stellenbosch and Kirstenbosch. It will take you days to walk from one end of one person's farm to another. I said some of them have vineyards that are bigger than Accra. And so when the black people are talking about the land issue, it does not behove on anybody to say those kinds of things to people who have suffered. And the blacks in South Africa are still suffering because what was institutionalized there over hundreds of years, they have not been able to break it. Indeed, some of them have become victims, like Ramaphosa, have become victims of the patronage themselves. So now, they actually, I don't know whether they see themselves as maybe half black, half white. I don't know. But all I'm saying is that he should have defended our position and given our side of the story, because like the Venerable Chinua Achebe wrote, until the lion learns to speak, tales of the hunt will always be told from the point of view of the hunter. But we all know that the hunt doesn't go like the hunter says, because sometimes they don't return. I think that Africans should tell a story, our story. And I think that President Mahama did a yeoman's job in correcting the record. The only thing I will caution though is that if President Mahama is ever invited to the Oval Office the next 4 years, he should be prepared for an onslaught, because what he said or what he wrote has not gone unnoticed.
That's published in The Guardian.
Yeah, it hasn't gone unnoticed. You see, our story is very unique. In the United States, no American president is allowed to apologize for slavery, because they say it will come with legal consequences vis-a-vis reparations. But American presidents apologize for Nazism. Nazism took place in the 1940s for 12 years. They apologized for it. Our struggle, our oppression took place over hundreds of years. The Western industrial complex as it is now, and it doesn't matter where it is. You see, let's not limit this matter to America. For those of you who go to the United Kingdom, who do you think built the underground as it is? The origins of slavery, the people who started getting picked up as slaves, they didn't just go to America. The first spot they went to is Liverpool. So there is a slavery museum in Liverpool. And I know, because I'm a Liverpool supporter, everybody knows my support for Liverpool Football Club. There's a slavery museum at the docks of Liverpool. Albert Docks is there. The reason is there is that Liverpool was the transshipment point for slavery. So slavery occurred in Europe, right? And in the case of the United Kingdom, they actually went and enslaved people, because that's the only way I can put it. They went and brought Caribbeans to come and build the underground. As we speak today, they are asking some of them who came to build those underground to go back to the Caribbean. It happened like 2 years ago. Remember that guy who had forgotten to regularize his papers, but had been in the UK since the 1960s. He was asked to go back. He said, you should go back. Until some human rights people stepped in and was like, what are you talking about? So our story is unique. Go to France. The story is the same. French people, the Gaulois, the white French, they routinely write articles and ask, is the French football team French or is it African? And yet, probably the best football team, national team in the world today is the French national team. It is not white. And the reason why they do well is the amalgam of footballers that they have in the team, because they have players from Mali. They have players who originate, whose ancestry is Malian, Cameroonian, Guinean, Burkinabes. And these are big, strong, tall guys. So add the nutrition and the genetics, and they are slapping everybody around. But they are only good when they win the trophy. In between them winning the trophy, people start questioning whether they are French. Our story is a tale of woe. I just hope and pray that when our leaders have an opportunity, they don't let it slip, because Cyril Ramaphosa has set us back decades by not telling our story when he had an opportunity to do so, allowing himself to be intimidated in that manner. You have been to prison for you have been to prison, right? Prison on the back of apartheid. What else could have happened to you? But you see, we as Africans, we have ourselves to blame. We have ourselves to blame, because we are told that when our economy is bad, we should just let people suffer. And then the people who tell us that we should let people suffer when our economy is bad, when their economy gets into trouble, they have something they call quantitative easing. You know what quantitative easing is?
Print of money.
Print cash. And then they amortize it by redimensioning the classic laws of economics, right? To take care of what they have done. So what are we doing? We could go on and on and on and on. I think most of us who have the sense to see what happened, know what happened, know that the man lost an opportunity. I don't know when we will get that opportunity again. Given the current trends in America these days, may take a while. But my encouragement to our African leaders, the likes of those coming up, I mean, just recently, I don't know whether you guys have heard what happened to Lewin, the actor who's trying to make a movie about Ibrahima Traore. The French Secret Service have been intimidating him to stop the movie. He's been called several times not to make that movie. On the day he started shooting, he was attacked by unknown people. Because some people have recognized. Yeah, some people have begun to recognize that the man has become, is becoming
a hero,
an icon. I don't know how long he will live, because the way they are going, you know, with these people, you have to be safe 100% of the time, right?
It's impossible.
With them, they need to be lucky ones. So the odds don't favor him. Same thing they did. I mean, when they try and they can't, they'll find somebody from within. Isn't that the story of Sankara? They'll find your best friend. They will find something. Somebody your father has fed. Something. And that story is not a story that we don't know. Because for those of us who are Christians, our faith is founded on an act of betrayal by an insider. If Judas had not disclosed the whereabouts of Jesus Christ, we won't be where we are. There will be no Habemus Papa. No white smoke would have been billowing from anywhere. The Sistine Chapel will not have the paintings of Michelangelo. The Catholic Church will not be the richest organization in the world.
No,
that single act of betrayal. So we are not new. Today, for those of us like Uncle Kwesi, I don't see the reason why I should wake up on Sunday and go to church. Hey. I would rather thank God for my life, wherever he may be. I'll pray to him in my room. thank him for his mercies.
Socialization.
Hold on, please, Doc. You see, because I'm a Presbyterian by birth, and when the Presbyterian Church was actively insulting John Mahama, I did not agree with them.
Was it a Presbyterian church or an individual?
It was the individuals, the leaders of that organization make up the individuals. Right? When the moderator of the Presbyterian Church said the president of this country that people had voted for, please, what he said, I will say it, we all know what he said. When the other guy was threatening hail and brimstone if we don't vote for him, he refused to recognize that. I will not go and sit in church with you preaching to me and dilute my blessings. So I'll stay at home. Because after we voted for that guy, my cousin, 8 years on, what has happened?
Ramaphosa.
What has happened? 8 years. I told you what will happen. What has happened?
What has happened is that you are now in government.
Me and you, we both lost our bank accounts, no be so. We both lost our savings, no be so. Exactly. So we are sitting here. Let's start again. After 25 years, as for Dr. Kisi, he didn't lose it because they gave him a heads up that it was coming. So he went to quickly withdraw his money and change it to dollars. So
South Africa.
We are talking about the same thing. We are talking about the Uncle Sams and Uncle Toms and whatever it is who have destroyed our country.
And got medal in.
And one of them just left power. He sat in front of the people and reported his own brothers to them. But there are historical antecedents of the people. Your
Ramaphosa.
Oh, Doc. Oh, stop it, please. You people are the people who went to tell the Queen that she shouldn't give us independence. I'm heading there. Keep quiet and listen.
True.
You wore tailcoat. When you were going, you didn't even work a day. You wore tailcoat and went to tell the Queen that why is she stopping the African experiment?
Historically is wrong. Yeah, right.
Shame on you.
Yeah, right.
What you should be doing is apologizing and not trying to stop me from saying what the people need to know. Stop it.
So you mean to say it, eh?
You two, and they didn't even go with an aircraft. They went with a ship. You sat on a freighter, no less, cargo ship, and you went to London and you went to tell the Queen that she should continue colonialism. Me can't now stop him. The people need to know that you people are a disgraceful lot. Right? Your antecedents is what has brought Ghana to where it is. Your opposition to Kwame Nkrumah. The things you did. When you came to power, you discontinued the building of railways and so that you could buy articulated trucks and ship stuff. That is why we are where we are today. You people should be ashamed of yourself. And if you ever come back to power with people who are Africans through and through. Because our story is a sad one. As we speak today, we are still tethered to an economic model that doesn't work for us. I said, this man sitting here, in 1982, I said, I was a young man, I was in secondary school, boldly stood up and said, where the government was going to become problematic. Did he lie or was he telling the truth? 44 years ago, right? People pay prices for telling the truth. I said, we have one of them sitting here. And today some people, you are afraid you cook a crack now, toilet is on a wusu. Yeah, me and